Before I could speak, her guards entered the room. I didn't know what was happening at first, but the queen's voice rang out again. Beat her up. She's nothing but a threat to the royal bloodline. The cold order echoed through the chamber as the guards grabbed me roughly. I struggled, but the strength of the queen's men was too much. They pulled me down, pinning me to the stone floor, and I felt my heart break as I saw Prince Kofi standing at the end of the corridor. His face was pale, his lips trembling, but his eyes, they spoke the pain of 1,000 unspoken words. His hands, shaking, reached out for me, but there was nothing he could do. The queen had already sealed my fate. As the guards dragged me through the palace halls, my thoughts were consumed with the love I had for the prince. I could hear his footsteps behind me, fading as the palace door slammed shut. I was to be taken away, but I had a plan. The queen, obsessed with controlling her son's future, had never once considered the depth of the bond between Kofi and I. It was something pure and unspoken, but she was blind to it. Her obsession with power had clouded her judgment, and I would make her pay for it. Earlier that day, I had overheard the queen's plans to host a grand feast in honor of her son's upcoming marriage to a noblewoman. The palace kitchen buzzed with activity, preparing the finest dishes for the occasion. But I had other plans. I had secretly mixed a rare, potent herb into her meal, the kind that, when consumed in high doses, would induce paralysis and cause the heart to stop. It was a quiet, effective method, but I never meant to take her life, not at first. I had only wanted to stop her, to make her incapable of doing any more harm to me, to Kofi. My love for him was too strong, and I knew he was being torn apart by his mother's cruel demands. The prince had touched my hand in the garden once, his fingers brushing mine like a promise that we could be more than the roles we were assigned. That simple touch had ignited something deep inside me. I loved him, and I couldn't bear to see him suffer. But what I had done in the queen's chamber, what I had prepared for her meal, was irreversible. The queen ate the poisoned food, as I had planned. At first, nothing seemed to happen. She smiled at the guests, welcoming them with her usual cold grace. But as the night wore on, something shifted. Her face grew pale, her body stiffened, and she struggled to breathe. It didn't take long before the guards rushed to her side, panic in their eyes. And then the truth came out. The queen had been poisoned, and whispers spread like wildfire through the palace. My heart sank when the realization hit me. I had done something irreversible. Kofi would never forgive me for what I had done, even if it was to protect him. I was caught. The guards broke into my quarters, dragged me from my hiding place, and threw me before the royal court. I looked up to see Kofi standing at the edge, his eyes wide with disbelief. I wanted to scream out to him, to tell him the truth, but the words wouldn't come. "Why, Amara?" he asked, his voice a broken whisper. "Why would you do this?" The queen's cold, lifeless body lay in front of us, and I knew that everything had changed. "I did it for us," I tried to explain, but my voice was too weak. "For you." Kofi's eyes filled with sorrow, and he stepped back, his hand reaching out for mine. I took it, feeling his warmth, but there was no comfort in it. The love we shared had become a tragedy. He had been torn between his duty to his mother and his heart's desire to be with me. But now, there was no going back. The guards took me away, but not before I heard the prince's voice one last time. "You've killed her, and yourself," Kofi whispered, the weight of his words sinking deep into my heart. "I loved you, but now I'm lost." I was locked away in the dungeon, knowing that my fate was sealed. They would never let me go. The queen's death was all anyone would remember. The days passed in silence, with only the echoes of my own thoughts to keep me company. I never saw Prince Kofi again, though I knew he would never forget me, as I would never forget him. We had been torn apart by love, by duty, and by the cruelty of a queen who feared the loss of her power more than the happiness of her son. The queen's death shook the kingdom, but it was a hollow victory. Kofi married the noblewoman, as his mother had planned, but he was never the same. The joy in his eyes had dimmed, and the love we once shared seemed like a distant memory. He had no choice but to do what his mother had demanded, but he couldn't escape the darkness that had taken over his heart. As for me, my love for him never truly died. Even in the depths of my dungeon, I held on to the hope that one day, somehow, he would remember the love we shared. But for now, I was nothing more than a forgotten servant, the cause of a tragedy that would haunt the palace for generations to come.